Hello and welcome to another Takeda episode of the Eternal Law. On the last Takeda episode we saw Takeda forces storming Owari province and capturing it with ease. However, the capture triggered the realm divide, causing all of the other clans on Japan to hate the Takeda for no good reason. Then the Takeda continued their assault against the Ikko, capturing their home territory. Then suddenly Shogun forces from the west, responding to the realm divide, came and attacked Harima province. Their men desperately assaulted the castle, and the Takeda men equally desperately defended it. In the end, it was an extremely close battle, almost everybody died, but the Shogun forces just about won out, claiming the castle. Then Takeda forces began to campaign against the Ikko rebellion in North Shinano, destroying one of their armies and then capturing the castle back, restoring the old Takeda domain right from the beginning of the campaign. Then the most veteran Ikko army marched on Setsu province and was ambushed by a relatively weak Takeda force, who were forced to fight to the death and were still unable to defeat the entire Ikko army. Now let's continue. Now hear this. Hear the story of Baba Mochitame. He was a man of no birth, a mere Ashigaru who showed such skill that I felt honoured to ask him to lead my personal reserves. Earlier this day he found our enemy trying to steal a march on our castle, and despite having the lesser force he committed himself to protecting the source of the food all of you eat right now. He gave his life, as did all the brave subjects he commanded, so that the Takeda name could be respected in these lands. They are an example for us all. So here are the battle results from the disastrous ambush we saw at the end of the last Takeda episode, in which our force was destroyed, as is made clear by the battle results screen. However, we also did manage to kill a large number of enemy troops, so much so that the enemy's army is pretty much shattered. They have no chance of attacking the castle, so in a strategic sort of way, the battle was a success, but at great cost. Now the Ikko are going to continue their autumn turn. First, they send ships to attack this tiny little Takeda patrol out in the middle of the sea. One of their ships is a heavy bune, which I decide cannot really be defeated with my 2 damaged Sengoku bune, so I simply retreat, and the naval engagement comes to nothing. The Ikko then go down hard on our allies, the Kitapatake, so it looks like they're in trouble. Speaking of being in trouble, the force that defeated our army in the ambush just now started retreating back towards Ikko lands, but was then ambushed again by Shingen's force. So Shingen has a chance to avenge the forces of General Baba by destroying all of the survivors in the Ikko army, and they're gone with ease, almost no losses to Shingen's force. Of course, Shingen still has 2 Ikko armies in the area to deal with, but still a symbolic victory for his forces. So here's the situation with the Kitapatake. They're being besieged by 3 armies here, with a 4th one that looks like it's coming down as reinforcements just to the north. So they are in trouble. The Kitapatake field army has already been defeated, so they only have their standing army in the castle, which will not be enough to stop the Ikko should they assault, which means this could be the last turn for our ally. Shingen too is in somewhat of a hairy situation with these 2 Ikko armies ready to pounce, so he's moving to a new hidden position near the castle in an attempt to evade them, or at least only fight them one at a time. Now the North Shinano battlefront has been cleansed, so it's time for all the forces we had engaged there to move on to the next target, which logically is South Shinano. We're going to unify Shinano under the Takeda banner. We have 2 large armies which we can move down and can just about reach the castle with their movement range. So it looks like we're going to be able to capture the castle this turn. Nobukado's force is leading the assault with a massive reinforcement army right behind him. We have such a massive advantage that auto-resolve should give us an easy victory. And indeed it does. Very minor losses there in the auto-resolve, so we've captured the castle. Takeda lands are starting to get much more unified now as a result of this capture. We have pretty much unified our heartland of Shinano and Kai now. The only Ikko threat to our homeland is now the former Yamanouchi lands, which they sneakily captured at the beginning of this war, and I'm hoping the Date clan will go and deal with that situation, so I'm ignoring that for now. I'm going to be continuing to move my forces out of South Shinano and to the western battlefronts, where the situation in the Mino Owari area could get much worse, so I really wanted to reinforce my position there. The next battlefront to have a look at is in Echizen, around the Ikko homelands. But here Nobushige's army, which has been very usefully conquering all of the Ikko homelands, is ready to move on because he's been reinforced by Takeda Yoshinobu, who is going to stay behind and guard the castle, whilst he moves forward to scout and look for other enemy armies, setting up an ambush position on a crossroads between Wakasa and Echizen. This way he can ambush any Ikko forces going either into Echizen or Umi, so it's a nice position for him to ambush from. We'll see if anything comes of that. Now the next thing to consider is what to do with General Yamadera's army. He has a small force which could go and challenge some of the Ikko reinforcements heading to the siege of the Kitapataki castle. However, he can't really win a decisive battle. All he can do is grind down his own men against theirs, so I'm not really in a position to actually go and help my ally. What I can do is what I'm doing here, moving him into an ambush position that will simply stop any more reinforcements coming through, and it will protect Owari from invasion from the west or south. So it's a very useful position for him to be, for both our allies and ourselves. The forces currently occupying Mino also can move out into an ambush position. Their position is only really going to defend Mino itself because it's blocking the road from Mino to Umi, but still a useful position to have an ambush. So we've set up loads of ambushes during that turn, so now we're going to go through the end-turn sequence and see if any of them trigger. Some good news is that the Date forces both destroy one of the Ikko fleets and appear to move ground forces westward, perhaps moving down towards the Wakasa region, or perhaps doing some obscure way to go south. And it looks like the first of our ambushes has been triggered. It's Yamadera's army, and he is ambushing what appears to be the Ikko main force. It's led by their daimyo and the son of the daimyo, and is filled with elite troops. Yamadera is in trouble, but this is a golden opportunity. It was not hard to find them, sir. Every day their column halts and sets up a lavish camp, from which the sounds of drums and the smell of foreign incense fill the night. The reason for this is the presence of the Ikko Grand Commander among their ranks. They are marching for the Ise-Owari Junction, my lord, less than a day from here. However, their men are the Ikko's finest, and they worship their general like a god. I suspect an ambush will be to them as natural as a fly landing on their helmets. But listen not to me. You alone must decide our fate. And so, unable to resist the opportunity, Yamadera's force is deployed against the Ikko Grand Commander. You can see the bulk of the force is positioned quite far away from the enemy's marching column. They're in a standard skirmishing front line and melee second line formation, while all of the anti-cav and spear units are positioned in a hidden area on a small hill to the north of the battlefield. So we want to try and draw the enemy towards us so that they'll force themselves to be outflanked by our hidden units. My other strategy was to try and engage the enemy units at range for as long as possible, because I actually appeared, at least, to have a slight missile advantage in this fight, whilst the enemy has a heavy infantry advantage. So the more of the heavy infantry I can whittle down before the battle really starts, the better. However, of course the enemy did move forward their archers, but instead of targeting my archers, they targeted my heavy infantry. And it turns out that these Ikko archers were super elite. They happen to have the improved accuracy upgrades, and they have veterancy, which means they are absolutely destroying my men with their arrows. Their accuracy is impeccable, and within a few seconds, like 1/3 to half of these two units have been obliterated by arrow fire. I'm trying to distract them and get them to fire at my archers, who are more expendable targets, but it doesn't seem to be working. And instead I have to go with a slightly more drastic option. First I just loosen up the formations, hoping that would reduce casualties, but I thought it wouldn't be enough. So you can see I simply retreat the main line from the battlefront, leaving the archers isolated in front in the hope that the enemy will start targeting the archers instead. But no, the enemy are determined to attack my main line. They simply move their own archers forwards. The good news, that means my archers get a clearer shot on them and can start wiping them out. Simple Ashigaru here, who have been really decimating my samurai forces, proving the strength of the bow. Behind them they have bow samurai, who I am inclined to kill first because of their extreme accuracy. Here you can see the samurai. So this arrow battle continues, the enemy mostly focusing on my infantry. I'm desperately trying to move them around and get them out of the line of fire. You can see how many bodies are already on the battlefield just because we're taking losses from these arrows. It's really bad news. So the skirmish continues, and I was hoping the enemy's main force would move forward at some point so I can do my flanking strategy, and after a while it seems they finally make the decision. They get bored of skirmishing and start a cavalry attack. whilst the bulk of their force gradually comes into the charge. So I'm rushing my archers back to reunify my force and get a stronger formation going. I'm forced to move my main line out to meet the enemy's cavalry to save my archers, who are about to get rear charged there, and I just about succeed. So the enemy cavalry are going to have a hard time fighting through those Naginata samurai. Now I need to wait for the rest of the enemy main line to get in position. I've already started moving my long Yari Ashigaru out of hiding to start flanking them. The enemy responded by using bow cavalry to bombard my long Yari Ashigaru, which is a good idea because they are a slow moving, densely packed unit. You can see they're going to be taking heavy casualties from that arrow fire. However, the enemy can't kill enough of them, and I did happen to have some hidden cavalry right at the back who was able to distract the enemy's bow cavalry for long enough to allow my long Yari Ashigaru to get into the battle. The battle itself, as you can see, has already started. The samurai are fighting on the front lines. I think my men are probably at a slight disadvantage just because of veterancy. It's mostly the same unit types, but the enemy have a slight numerical advantage, and their men are generally of rank 5 and 6, as mine is sort of rank 2 and 3, which means the enemy are significantly more powerful. And you can see, as usual, the enemy have a significant bulkier line than ours. It's much heavier and appears to be pushing deeper and deeper into the Takeda lines. Just a couple of men deep now on the Takeda side. The flanks could break if they're not careful. Now, it looks like that on the far right flank, some of my long Yari Ashigaru have been caught up by some warrior monks there, but the rest of them did manage to get into the fight and are now attacking the enemy from the rear. Very good news. It means our right flank is going to be significantly strengthened, because the enemy's morale is going to be tested by this rear attack, and they're going to be crushed between the spears and the swords. Being attacked by a small phalanx from the back can do devastating damage to enemy units in this game, because they don't defend against the spear thrusts when they're coming from behind, so you can cause extreme casualties very quickly if you get in there without the enemy noticing. The bad news is that my centre has all but broken, and the enemy are now fighting with my archers on the back line. You can see my general position behind them, so it looks like the centre of my army is going to crumble very shortly, unless I can do something about the flanks and fold inwards on myself to defend the area around Yamadera himself. Out on the left flank, I'm reinforcing my melee infantry with my bow samurai, just to lengthen the amount of time they're going to be fighting for against these opponents, in the hope that my long Yari Ashigaru can do their work on the right flank in time. Now, these long Yari Ashigaru did turn out to be the stars of the show. You can see they're pushing through the enemy ranks, knocking the enemy back or killing them, which means the right flank was pretty much secure. I was able to separate off a unit to come and deal with the left flank. The left flank wasn't going very well. You can see the enemy general himself, the daimyo of the Ikko clan, is fighting on his own. It seems he is determined to fight this battle even though the rest of his guards are killed. You can see Yamadera there almost got close enough to kill him himself. But now the enemy general charges into the centre, where I'm actually now winning out because of sheer force of numbers. Now he gets engaged by a couple of the long Yari Ashigaru behind him, and he's in trouble. He's knocked off his horse and killed, and the men rightly cheer in celebration. This leaves only a very small number of enemy troops on the battlefield, and their morale has been severely damaged. So it didn't take much to chase them off the field. I simply charged them with everything I had, and they retreated. So a victory was won. We have captured the field and killed a very large number of the enemy troops, including their daimyo and the son of the daimyo, who happened to be two of their most elite generals. So a very good move, but of course the casualties were quite high. They broke a large number of our units, and our samurai were damaged fighting with the enemy samurai. You can see here on the battle results screen, we've lost a whole bunch of regiments. Perhaps half of Yamadera's army was completely destroyed, and the remaining half is quite depleted. A lot of the regiments have fewer men than they should. So this army has been made functionally useless by the battle. However, we have destroyed a very important part of the Ikko force. So it swings and roundabouts really. And before we have any time to consider whether that was really a good or a bad battle, another battle of almost the same nature occurs. This time it's Nobushige's force going up against an Ikko army which has no general and is fortunately a bit weaker. However, Nobushige's force is an Ashigaru army with no heavy infantry, as the enemy army does have that advantage, so he has to be very careful if he wants to win out in this situation. And so, in order to account for the lack of heavy infantry, I'm trying a slightly unconventional tactic. I deployed Nobushige and a few archers in clear sight, whereas behind them I had the entire army hidden in a forest, very far from the enemy's column. I thought the enemy column might charge towards me and give me a chance to ambush them in a kind of frontal assault where my men would be most strong since they are Ashigaru. who can only really defend the ground immediately in front of them. The enemy instead decides to go and just occupy a nearby hillside, so now I have to deal with a hill siege situation. Less fanatic than we planned for, eh? I expect their captain is a veteran. Find them. Everyone's just getting cold standing around, I expect. Let's move. They have correctly identified that hill as the strong point in this area, yet they apparently failed to realise the blow they do to themselves by staking their spears up there. The initiative, gentlemen. It takes a long time reading through the battle reports to see that it is the ability to move freely and manipulate that really wins. As they wait for us, we may toy with them as we wish. So what are we going to do about the Ikko force? Here it is. They've stationed themselves in a strange sort of way, partially on top of the hill and partially behind it, with large amounts of heavy cavalry screening their flanks. You can see here the Nobushige female cavalry warriors are ready to do some damage. They're essentially mounted katana samurai. However, I believe they're just a little bit faster and more aggressive than the male armoured version. You can see I've told my army to go and hide itself in a forest near their hill to await any sort of movement from them. At the same time, I'm moving my cavalry to their rear. My cavalry is all light Ashigaru cavalry, nothing that can really stand up in engagement. However, the enemy does get worried by the fact that I am outflanking them, and they start severely changing their formation in an attempt to keep safe against a potential rear attack. In the process, some of their men come down the hill and come into archery range of my front lines, and so we engage in a small skirmish. You see the enemy's bow samurai are bombarding me with flaming arrows. I'm slightly protected by the fact I'm in the edge of this little bamboo forest, which stops some of the arrows coming through. However, when another bow samurai unit engages my Ashigaru, there's no chance. I'm forced to just completely cool off this skirmish altogether and fall back out of range once again. The rest of my force, of course, remaining hidden, so the enemy in theory doesn't know I have an army back there. And perhaps that's why they choose to send their heavy cavalry out at this moment. Though of course they do discover the units. You can see my light cavalry has drawn away all of the enemy's heavy infantry from the hill. Good news, the hill itself is now relatively undefended. Perhaps I could go and take it myself. The enemy's heavy cavalry does a very bad job of not charging into my spear line. They sort of charge across the front of it for a while as if they weren't going to go in. Then they get caught up and decide to try and fight their way through. But it is to no avail, and this unit is severely damaged as a result. So now the enemy suddenly decide that now they know where I am, they are going to attack, which in many ways was exactly what I wanted. So it looks like I got my frontal assault in the end. However, the enemy do have such a cavalry advantage that they can just come around my flanks as they please, and their missile advantage allows them to force me forwards into them, rather than them coming up the hill and fighting me on the top. So I have to give away some of my advantage just to prevent the enemy from whittling me away with their bows. So I charge my light infantry out to engage with the enemy's bowmen to stop them firing. I charge my reserve Naginata Ashigaru onto my own left flank to kill all these Onobushi Cav who are trying to come and fight with my Tetsubo pirates in the background there. The Onobushi Cav are going to be defeated quite readily in this situation, so I wasn't very worried about that. Now the enemy's archers, you can see, are being tied up by these lone sword Ashigaru, stopping them from firing and removing their real power. And where's the rest of the enemy's heavy infantry, which should be responding against me? It's dallying on the back of the hill because it took them a very long time to come back after they chased my light cavalry so far away. So, such a long time in fact that I was able to set up a new formation at the bottom of the hill before they even finished coming over the crest. So I've got a fairly stable situation where the enemy can't really attack me in any particularly weak position, and I am able to exploit some of their weaknesses because their formation is so spread out. Here, for example, all of my light cavalry charge in and decimate one of the enemy's bow samurai units. They're in a pretty dangerous position. You can see there in the background the enemy's heavy infantry is forming up, ready to move forwards against me. So I need to get out of the way before that happens. On my left flank I've destroyed all of the enemy's heavy cavalry except one regiment, and I'm moving up more spearmen ready to defend the centre. My central position is looking pretty stable now, and the flanks have just about been cleared of enemies. However, it looks like the enemy are going to sacrifice one more unit of cavalry, charging them into my massed spears here. Looks like it's some warrior monks who they've chosen to engage here. They're going to be very weak against them, so my men should prevail. Back over with my light cavalry, the enemy have finally sent some infantry to fight against them, so I'm forced to retreat from that area of the battlefield. Now it looks like the enemy have come down off the hill and are finally engaging my centre as I'd always wanted, charging right into the front of spear walls, which is the ideal way to use these long Yari-Ashigaru, and really the only situation in which they are strong. Here I almost failed, I almost didn't get the spear wall up in time. I think I just about managed to make the enemy engage me in the front. I was kind of retreating whilst I was attacked. Here some Naginata Ashigaru are just completely chilling whilst they're being attacked in the front. They're going to hold that for a very long time because of their high defense stats, so my left flank is going to be pretty much secure. All the action is going to be happening here in the centre. Unfortunately, it looks like some of my long Yari-Ashigaru are being attacked in the flank with these enemy katana pirates, against which they'll be very weak. However, I had another unit of long Yari-Ashigaru that can simply fold around their flank. In fact, I think it's folding around to their rear and simply destroy them. So now the battle lines have been set in the centre, they're going to fight it out. I moved my Tetsubo pirates up the hill, and when they got up the hill they found some enemy heavy sword pirates were waiting for them. So it's a battle of pirates against pirates, giant clubs against giant swords. And I think the enemy's giant swords were just about winning out in this situation. However, I believe just after this moment I rear charged them with some cavalry I'd been moving around at the back, and the enemy were defeated in that region. Here you can see the enemy is finally deploying their last melee units, some warrior monks, and they come in against my long Yari-Ashigaru in a way which is devastating for me because they surround them on 3 sides. So those men are in trouble. What I need to do is defeat the enemy here and then send these men to go and reinforce. And it looks like that is going to happen. The enemy numbers are definitely dwindling. I'm seeing more red uniforms than I are silver and white. It looks like the right flank is about to be won. Here in the centre, the messy engagement is continuing. It looks like we finally defeated those katana pirates.
Glorious victory will soon be yours.
On the left flank, all remaining troops break, and here are those cavalry I mentioned, having finished their rear attack on the enemy's heavy katana pirates. So it looks like it's over. All remaining enemy troops are retreating up the hill. Very bad for them because my cavalry can simply mop them up. And so it's a decisive victory. Nobushige's Ashigaru army has successfully defeated this Ikko samurai army and now can move on to even greater deeds. The snow is bad here. It is hard to move most days. The only time I was warm this week was in the battle we fought. As usual, I shall spare the details. Suffice to say, we won a fine victory, but there was something strange about it all. Our army is one of Ashigaru, a great mass of common men with common spears. The Ikko Ikki force is filled with old and veteran samurai. Why do we people fight for the samurai lords while the samurai fight for the rule of the people? All the boys know there was something to the Ikki. The battle results from this ambush are a little bit better than the battle results from the last ambush at least. We lost a couple of regiments of Ashigaru here. Not anything we can't replace. We did lose some fire cavalry, which is unfortunate, but a lot of Nobushige's army is intact. He still has a lot of men and potentially could take part in another battle without retreating to restore the strength of his force. So that's now the Ikko army defeated. It looks like the Ikko are moving yet more reinforcements against the Kitapitake, and then they destroy them. The Kitapitake are gone. But now it's time for another ambush because Shingen is being attacked by another Ikko force, and this time we actually have an advantage in this ambush. Our men are fairly veteran and fairly powerful. The enemy's army isn't anything particularly impressive. They aren't raw recruits by any means, and they do have a number of ninja amongst them, but it's nothing we can't defeat. So it's time for Shingen to shine and defeat this army, but he needs to have enough troops left alive after this fight to defeat the next Ikko army, which is surely going to come against him. Let's see if he can do this. And so the battle opens, Shingen deploying his small but experienced force in a simple 2-line formation in front of him with all of his cavalry on the right flank, all of his exposed cavalry anyway. Those cavalry are missile cavalry carrying rifles, so they'll be skirmishing rather than engaging directly. He has 3 units hidden in the forests behind the Ikko force, who the Ikko don't seem to know about because they send no units in that direction. You can see the enemy begin by charging their cavalry in, but the riflemen on horseback unleash volleys, cutting half of them off their horses from those 2 regiments, and the rest of them charge straight into the infantry. Some of the Bow Ashigaru there failed to skirmish their way back through the line and actually got caught in the cavalry charge. Quite bad, but the rest of them are going to get destroyed by these Naginata samurai who are just behind the archers waiting to engage. And here we see tons of the enemy cavalry charging right into a spear wall. They're in a very bad situation. Out on the flanks, cavalry skirmishes are happening. You can see this enemy regiment here has been almost decimated. They're down to just a couple of men as the rifle troops cut the men off their horses. However, once those rifle troops get engaged by enemy cavalry, they're going to be in trouble because they're not really fast enough to escape. So they're going to spend the rest of the battle simply running around the battlefield trying not to get engaged rather than actually playing a decisive part. But you can see the front lines of the armies are decisively engaging here. And we actually have an advantage. The enemy is pressing most of their power into the centre, however they're so bunched up and unsure of where they're going to attack that they're not really putting any sort of real pressure on the line. As a result, we're just killing the light attacks they're putting into the front and keeping our position safe. However, as you can see, the middle of our line is being blown apart by the enemy's Kisho ninja, who are throwing grenades forwards over the top of their comrades and taking out our spear wall. However, the grenades were not powerful enough to actually break the spear wall. It held on very well, so our centre was secure. And you can see the enemy's cavalry are getting really bogged down in melee here. Very good news. The enemy are still charging more and more men into the centre. However, I have revealed my hidden troops, and this is really distracting the enemy. They're sending loads of troops backwards and forwards, not really sure which front they should engage on, which is perfect for me. Because it means the enemy aren't going to be focusing their full strength on my men, so I'm going to maximise my number of survivors. Now we've gone back in time a little bit just to when this Kisho ninja attacked, just so I could show you a little bit of a different angle on what was happening on the other side of the battlefield. The reason I'm doing this is because this battle replay is actually corrupted, so in a moment we're going to have to just stop and I'm going to have to just tell you what happened for the rest of the battle, because we can't see the full extent of it. You can see one of the shining moments was these Katana cavalry who I had hidden way off to the south side of the battlefield, finally arriving and decimating 2 regiments of the enemy's archers. Very good news. And you can see here some of the spearmen I brought forward from hiding on the west side, engaging with the enemy's fire cavalry and destroying them, bogging them down and knocking them off their horses with ease. So these are the final moments of the battle that I actually have footage of, because the rest of the battle replay is corrupt. As I said, it simply freezes and won't play. But you can see the battle was going okay. Our central line was holding up against the heavy enemy assault and not buckling, and our assault on the rear of the enemy lines was beginning. You can see enemy troops are running away from the main battle to go and get involved in the skirmishes at the back. And basically what happened was the enemy centre was getting weaker and weaker as it tried to break through our lines, and then my men coming around the back eventually just routed them. And it was a decisive victory, as the battle's results screen says here. We didn't lose any regiments, but we did take quite a few losses because of the general grindiness of that battle. So the army's still in pretty good shape. It's probably lost about a third of its troops. It's still battle ready, and that's a pretty good thing because it's being attacked straight away. The next Ikko army walks up and decides to challenge Shingen's army. This Ikko force is filled with heavy Naginata samurai with some veterancy and tons of heavy cavalry. So this army is a little bit more powerful than the last one we faced, and Shingen's army this time is depleted. So it was a bit of a dangerous situation. You can see the balance of power in the middle is quite heavily in favour of our enemy. It took me a long time to decide what to do. I eventually decided to try and retreat, but Shingen decided not really to retreat. He took one step and then the battle simply re-engaged. So Shingen must now fight for his life. So if you want to see what's going to happen in that battle, you'll have to tune in for the next Takeda episode. That's all for this episode, but join me to see the Oda struggling against the tide of war next time on the Eternal Law.